Hi everyone, welcome back to Writing Tips with GSEP Writing Support. My name is Julie Stigmeyer, and today we're going to talk about writing annotated bibliographies and literature reviews. So these two assignments, an annotated bibliography and a literature review, are commonly assigned in many of the psychology classes. And so I thought I would cover the difference between them because they're often assigned within one class. So first, let's talk briefly about annotated bibliographies. An annotated bibliography is a type of assignment where you list out all of your sources alphabetically by the author's last name. And then you summarize each source to determine its helpfulness for your research. Here are some guidelines from the APA manual. So first of all, like I mentioned, your references will be in alphabetical order, the same way you would arrange them in a regular references page. Each annotation should be a new paragraph below its reference entry. Indent the entire annotation from the left margin, the same as you would a block quotation. And do not indent the first line of the annotation. So here's a sample from the APA manual. And I wanted to highlight a couple of things here. First of all, the name of this assignment, Annotated Bibliography, as you may guess, a bibliography is a list of references, okay? The annotated part of it is that you can see that word note in that term. And what that means is you're just making a note or you're summarizing what this source is all about. So that's the type of assignment this is just to show here's my source and then here's a note or a summary about it. And then many of your professors will also ask you to think about how helpful or how will it fit into your literature review or your research paper. As you can see in this sample, we have the name of the authors and the title, and this is from a chapter in a book. So we first have the reference, then down in the second part, it says this book chapter provides an overview of the psychosociological concept of work-life balance. So here is the notation, okay? Notice that this is in alphabetical order, so we start at the beginning of the alphabet with B. We also have a new paragraph with an annotation, and then, but no different indentation here. And then this goes on. Here's another screenshot from the second half of this page. You can see the next reference is Carlson. So that begins with letter C, so it's further down in the alphabet. And this is the journal entry example, and then here is the annotation. So annotated bibliographies can be helpful for gathering all your sources, and often then you can see at a quick glance when you're going back to do your research, which source would fit in what section of your paper. So it's a nice like starting point for your research to gather everything up. And then the next step often in these classes is to go on and write a literature review. So let's talk about this type of assignment. A literature review is a type of research paper, but it's often a new type of research paper for many Pepperdine students that I have found. It's a type of, it's a section from a scholarly academic paper. And so it's a little different if you haven't ever done original research. The review is organized around ideas or themes, not around the sources themselves. So with the annotated bibliography, you have source, summary, source, summary. So it's just by sources. With the literature review, you're thinking more holistically, looking at all of those sources and trying to put all those together in an analytical, synthesized way by organizing around themes. And like to reiterate here, it's not a list of your sources like an annotated bibliography. So here's an example of some unorganized information about the benefits of gratitude interventions. And this is a sample that I asked Rebecca Hines if I could draw from for this presentation. And she was glad to share that this is some of the research she found, all very recent, the different aspects of gratitude interventions that she discovered. Like I said, this is unorganized research, but this could be maybe like lines she might have pulled out of her annotated bibliography. What I did here is just bolded the topics. So you can see that the first one is about memory writing, increasing subjective well-being. The second one shows the timing that after 5 weeks so after finishing, after the gratitude interventions, the gratitude increased for 5 weeks. Then there was something about being low in trait gratitude and how that gave great results. Anyway, you can see these are different aspects of the same topic, but not organized. So then what she did was she took all of that evidence, all of that research, and she organized it into 3 themes. The first one was gratitude interventions increase happiness. And then she went a little deeper, gratitude interventions change the happiness set point. And then still further, gratitude interventions decrease depressive symptoms. So then under each of these sections, you can see she has various researchers. And you might notice, like, for example, the 𝐂𝐡𝐚𝐩𝐭𝐞𝐫𝐬, I don't know how you say that, is listed under all 3. That's okay, because this researcher may have looked at all these different aspects. But what she's done is she's broken it down by these themes. So let's move on now to a possible outline for a literature review. And I think this will help you see kind of the flow of the paper, and then we'll see how those themes fit in. When you begin your literature review, your introduction might be quite lengthy, maybe a page or page and a half, even 2 pages, because what you have to do is give some context. So you have your overall topic, why it's important to your field of study, kind of the big picture. What are the key trends and themes? Then the purpose of the literature review, or what brought you to this subject. And then you often have definition of key terms. So for example, with the gratitude example, we could maybe begin by talking about the importance of gratitude and how gratitude intervention study has been increased in recent years. Just very broad context. Then the purpose might be to show the benefits of gratitude interventions, something like that. Or it could be even to, you could also be studying, how to make a correct intervention for a certain population group or something like that. Then your key terms, probably in this case, she would have defined gratitude, happiness set point, trait gratitude, all those terms that were specific to her topic. And then, like I mentioned about those themes, what you would do is actually create an overview or like a thesis statement that would put all those together into one sentence. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. Then after the introduction, you would go into your first theme. So this might be the increasing happiness from gratitude. This would be changing the set point of happiness. So that's theme B. And in these sections, you might introduce it briefly, then synthesize your studies. So what was all the research saying? Continue on with theme C. And you might have more, but for a 10 to 12 page paper, usually 3 themes is plenty. And then you would end your paper with 2 sections, a discussion and then your conclusion. The discussion is important because it's really a chance for you to evaluate the literature. And you might say, what is missing? what is strong in the literature, what were maybe some of the research variables, that kind of thing. And then you'd briefly conclude your literature review by stating your main points and kind of moving forward from there. So how do you begin? Well, first of all, it's important to identify a tentative topic and do your research. And as you are researching, you narrow or broaden your topic as you read and learn. Then you gather sources about your topic, kind of all happening at the same time. And then you're trying to isolate those key themes. When you start your writing, you would create an overview statement. And then I'm going to help you understand what a meal plan is. It's an acronym to help you develop and organize your paragraphs. And then you synthesize your findings by moving from theme to theme. So let's talk about the topic. This is often one of the more difficult parts of the assignment because you're trying to narrow or broaden your topic depending and making sure that you have enough research, but not too much. So for example, Lisa Strawn shared this with me and was willing to share it with everyone. As she was narrowing down her topic on her literature review, she started by talking about dyslexia, other reading difficulties, and the effects of intervention on children. So this was a lot of information, and she only had 10 pages to cover. So she found that this was actually too much, too broad for her topic for a 10-page paper. Then she narrowed it down, not just focusing on dyslexia, where you can see the first one, she was going to address dyslexia as well as other reading difficulties, and the effects of various interventions. Now she found that the effects of phonics-based intervention for children with dyslexia might be a little too narrow. She couldn't find enough research. And then she found that after time, she went to this more generalized, but still pretty broad enough topic, temporal training for auditory processing and how that affects children with dyslexia. Again, only focusing on one reading difficulty and one intervention. And you know, if she would have had more time, she admitted she might have even addressed it differently, but this was her process. And it was maybe a 2-week time period where she was going back and forth and talking with me and her professor in consultation to try to find an appropriate scope. After you've figured out your topic, you start writing. And these are the steps that we're going to talk about. Create an overview statement, use the meal plan, and then synthesize your research. To create an overview statement, you usually provide a single sentence, it might sometimes be 2, that encapsulates all of the ideas within your paper. So here's an example. Grief among Latino adolescents can effectively be treated with CBT, group therapy, and family therapy. And then the reader would expect that this would be divided, the paper would be divided into 3 parts. Treating Latino adolescent youth with these 3 treatments: CBT, group therapy, and family therapy. And then here is an example from the gratitude paper. Gratitude interventions increase happiness, decrease depressive symptoms, and require effective timing. So depending on how you break those themes down, it could be slightly different. And then we would use the meal plan to develop paragraphs. The meal plan is an acronym that Duke University created. And the idea here is just a way to set up the sentences in your paragraphs. So you would divide them by M, E, A, and L. This doesn't mean that you only have 4 sentences in your paragraphs, but that your information generally follows this outline. The M refers to the main idea. This is the topic sentence, the bigger picture idea of your topic for that paragraph. Then you include your research or evidence. Then your analysis. So you're explaining what this means for related to your claim. And then you link back to your larger claim. This is usually your concluding sentence. So here's an example of a really nicely researched paragraph, but it lacked the meal plan. So we'll see, it's just a different feel for in each example. This one does not use that strategy. A study conducted by Cohen Park found that after 10 sessions of 𝐂𝐸𝐸G neurofeedback with patients with alcohol use disorder, the differences in brainwave activity were not significant. They report that 10 sessions are considered suboptimal for treatment outcome. Lackner et al. Conducted a 12-session neurofeedback study and also did not find a difference in abstinence rates post-intervention. So that's before the structure or this strategy. Here's an example after. For patients with alcohol use disorder, the treatment of 𝐂𝐸𝐸G neurofeedback appears to be ineffective with only a limited number of sessions. And then we go on and find the same evidence, then analysis. This shows that in this study, the 𝐂𝐸𝐸G neurofeedback treatment is considered a suboptimal outcome. Then we go on to the Lackner evidence. Again, this study details the treatment's lack of efficacy. And then we have our link sentence, so kind of summing everything up. These results reveal that the efficacy of 𝐂𝐸𝐸G neurofeedback for patients with alcohol use disorder is most likely unsubstantiated with only 10 or 12 sessions. So you can see that this gives a bigger, broader approach to the paragraph and summarizes and frames the information a little more effectively. The other thing I want to talk about here is there are some differences between key writing skills. Generally, in literature reviews and in most academic writing, you want to focus on paraphrasing over quoting. Quoting is using the exact words of the author, and paraphrasing is using your own words, but restating the author's idea. So typically, you want to focus on this second one. So quoting includes the exact words of the author with quotation marks and citing correctly, whereas paraphrasing uses different words and expresses the idea but still cites correctly. And usually you want to focus on that paraphrasing. These are two types of paraphrasing, summarizing and synthesizing. And what I mean by that is that you can do have a paraphrase where it's just one-to-one sentence. You have a sentence that you aren't quoting, instead you're putting into your own words. And that's kind of the typical definition of what we call a paraphrase. But if you think about it in a bigger picture, there are actually two other ways you can paraphrase. One is through summarizing, taking a big amount of information and making it smaller, or synthesizing, which is thinking of all of the information and putting it together into a cohesive whole. So here's the summarizing, giving a brief statement of the main points, and this is combining many ideas into a coherent whole. So with literature reviews, you're usually doing more of the synthesizing. You might also be doing the paraphrasing where it's one sentence to one sentence, but usually you're doing a little more of the synthesizing. Whereas with an annotated bibliography, you're focusing on summarizing. So let's look at this, and this is a sample looking at a definition of quality of life. And I want you to think about which is better synthesized. So if you think of pulling those ideas together better into a cohesive whole. In defining quality of life, it is important to understand the factors that contribute to the construct. First, when describing QOL, Bradlin et al. Define it as not being limited to the social, physical, and emotional functioning of the child and adolescent. This shows QOL can be defined as encompassing various factors. Similarly, Mulhern et al. Summarized QOL as a multifactorial construct that provides for performance within a developmental framework. The relevant QOL dimensions include A, physical functioning and comfort, B, psychological and social adjustment, and C, a person's satisfaction with self. Both of these researchers find similar definitions of QOL. So first of all, I want to point out a couple things with this paragraph. We have a nice opening sentence. That's our main idea, the M. And the last sentence is a pretty good link sentence summarizing everything. And then we have evidence within the body or the middle of the paragraph. So the structure of it is pretty good. Here's sample 2. In defining quality of life, it is important to understand the factors that contribute to the construct. First, several authors point out that physical functioning is vital to QOL. A secondary factor includes the social aspect of QOL. Third, emotional or psychological aspects of a person's QOL are essential. In addition, Mulhern et al. Point out the importance of a person's satisfaction with self as a final factor. These various aspects work together to define QOL. Okay, so in this example, I would suggest that if we look at sample 1, we have a few problems. Even though the structure of the paragraph is pretty good, we have 2 very long quotations. Well, not very long, but quite long. And this one is the Bradlin definition, and this one is the Mulhern definition. So this uses the skill of quoting pretty effectively, but in graduate level academic writing, you want to try to get away from quoting so much. And you want to also try to focus more on synthesizing with a literature review. So my suggestion is that this example is better synthesized because it pulls out these themes, physical, social, emotional aspects. And then this one didn't quite fit into one of those, so it's pulled out separately. That's fine. And then we have, so this is better synthesis. So there are these different skills that you use as a writer, and you kind of work to develop them as you're writing your literature review. So those are the things I wanted to share with you about literature reviews. Please do get in touch for writing support if you have any questions or concerns about your papers or you would like a reader to review them. In the meantime, happy writing.